Welcome to Online Essentials at Ashfield College. I'm Gary Hodgins and I'm going to be leading you through our examination of the new Junior Cert English examination and how you should think about preparing the night before the exam. So when we look at the guidelines that we've been given by the Department of Education, it's hard for us to clearly state exactly how many sections there's going to be on the exam paper and how much time you can spend on each section. So the new Junior Cert exam is not as certain as the one before. When we look at the Department of Education sample papers, the first sample paper that was delivered by the department had 4 sections, and each one of those sections had a different number of questions and a different timing scheme. Overall, the exam is 2 hours in duration, and while it's not as set in stone as it was before, looking at the 2 sample papers, you can see that you can't really, in any definitive sense, say how much time you should spend in answering each section and each question in each individual section. But don't despair. That shouldn't really put you off the night before the exam. Because when we look at this new exam, it's not actually asking you to be able to regurgitate prepared answers. In fact, this examination expects you to show evidence of higher order assimilation and metacognition. So what does that mean in layman's terms? Well, in the new skill-based assessment, you're being examined on how you can show your ability to interpret and respond to numerous texts, both studied and unseen. Unlike the old exam, there are several multiple choice questions. And in these sections of the exam paper, you can definitely make up time which you can use in answering the longer essay-style questions. So don't worry about the timing scheme. Instead, understand that if you're asked to write in response to a 10-mark question, you should set yourself a goal of writing 1 clear paragraph. So for a 20-mark question, you should write 2 paragraphs. For a 30-mark question, 3 paragraphs. And if you use this rule of thumb, you can't really go wrong. So it's the night before your English Junior Cert exam. What should you focus on? Well, in my view, you will get the most value out of focusing on fiction, drama, poetry, and creative and functional writing texts which will respond to the extracts and the studied texts in those 3 types of writing. So when you look at the fiction section of the exam, it's not terribly different in the manner of question which you're being expected to respond to. When you look at the fiction question, you're expected to have studied 2 novels from the prescribed list you were given in second year. Now, when you look at the questions that are being examined on these studied novels, you're asked to have a good understanding of character, relationship, themes, symbolism, key dramatic scenes, and how the stylistic devices which different writers use can heighten our sense of tension and suspense and create a greater sense of conflict and drama during key moments in the character's development. Creative writing and functional writing based on text is also commonly examined in this new exam. So when you look at the creative writing and functional writing text that you're being expected to write, it's not really that different from the directed activities related to text that you've been given during the course of studying your novels and your drama plays in the last 2 years. So you may be asked to write a letter from the fictional character's point of view during a key moment, or you might be asked to write a diary entry from the point of view of a character in an extract from a novel that you haven't read before. It could be possible that you're asked to write a newspaper report based upon a dramatic incident in a novel which you studied, or you might be asked to write some kind of an interview with a fictional character after reading the story of their life. So the most important thing is to remain calm and objective in the way that you approach this new exam paper, and to work on some basic general assumptions. If you're reading a story, whether it's a Shakespearean tragedy or whether it's a modern novel, every good story, according to Aristotle, writing over 2,500 years ago when he wrote the book The Poetics, should have a good beginning, middle, and end. So the plot of any story is essential to relating the experience of the characters and their relationship to themselves and the world, no matter whether it's written by William Shakespeare or Harper Lee. So when you look at preparing yourself for this exam paper, don't lose the plot. Don't get overwrought with emotion. It really is as simple as having a beginning, middle, and end. So when you look at the beginning of any story, the exposition usually introduces us to the setting. Characters are introduced, their relationship with one another and the world that they live in is often introduced. Sometimes a conflict is introduced at the beginning of a story, or our curiosity is aroused because the writer leaves out certain significant plot details, or introduces us to a dramatic dialogue or a dramatic incident, which we don't really understand the background to. So in preparing to answer questions on the fiction and drama sections, it's important to consider how the story makes meaning based upon the plot line. After the beginning is introduced, the character will often have to face complications, conflicts, which they have to work out or overcome. These conflicts often lead to a crisis in the character's experience. There may be some kind of outcome which develops based upon the conflicts which the character is living through. And then ultimately, you'll have a resolution in which the character learns something, grows as a person, or changes in some way. Or perhaps the character is forced to make a decision or act or do something significant in response to these growing conflicts and crises. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the primary texts that have been prescribed on the course and use them to go through the types of questions that you're most likely to face tomorrow in the exam. So when we look at the sample papers that have been provided by the department, it's clear that they're focusing on you as a student understanding this plot structure and how stories make meaning. Because remember, this is a skilled-based assessment. It's trying to get you to express your experience of reading and studying these novels, these plays, and these poems. So when you look at the questions that have come up on the exam papers that have been provided by the department, one question that came up was to list any 3 characteristics you believe are important for a good opening to a novel. Now, in responding to this question, you might say something like the following. The beginning of a novel should arouse our curiosity by beginning with a dramatic incident and leaving out certain details. This can create tension and suspense for the reader and arouse their curiosity. We may want certain questions answered, for example, how did this situation develop? Who is to blame? So you can see when I'm responding to the question that's given, I'm clearly stating my point first, and then I'm explaining how this point influenced me and my experience as a reader. Because providing the examiner with your personal response is always going to be important in this skill-based assessment. It shows your metacognition, your higher order learning in the process of studying literature. A second point you might make about the beginning of a good novel. A good opening can introduce an interesting setting by painting a vivid sense picture. For example, the setting may be given certain characteristics by means of personification, simile, or metaphor. A particular atmosphere may be introduced by appealing to the reader's sense of hearing, using sound effects such as alliteration, assonance, or onomatopoeia, or their sense of feeling by using interesting comparisons. Now, that is way too detailed for the number of marks that are on offer. 18 marks for each one. In reality, all that you're going to be expected to respond to is one sentence for each particular characteristic that you list. But obviously, as a teacher, I'm trying to give you more material than you necessarily need to write on the page. It's up to you to translate that to your own personal experience of the novel.